Hi everyone, welcome back to another fun-filled lesson of Actual English with Jennifer. My name is Jennifer Clyde. Now it's time for us to take a look at lesson 120, and today's topic is rebellious stage. So, did you ever have a rebellious attitude when you were growing up, during your teenage years, in your adolescence years? I think for most people, the answer would be yes. It's kind of a normal process that people go through. We don't necessarily rebel against our parents to hurt them or anything, but I think there is a point in time, especially during our teenage years, where we just don't want to be controlled by our parents. We just want to be disobedient sometimes, go against their rules, and just be us, right? So we kind of want to be different, and we somehow don't want to follow those rules. Now, some people say that it is a natural process of growing during adolescence, but now, if you have had that experience, you may not have had that experience of being rebellious. I've never been rebellious against my parents, but you may even have children that are going through that phase right now. But it's inevitable. It's unavoidable. So let children be children, right? Now, some people say that allowing teens to actually be themselves is helpful, right? They can prevent conflict that really harm relationships or even communication. After all, the rebellious stage is short-lived, so don't worry too much. Anyhow, enough talk about the beginning of our show and our topic. Let's get straight to the actual talk conversation. Let's listen.
You know that whole James Dean, live fast, die young, have a ravaging corpse,
yeah.
rebel without a cause.
Motorcycles, leather jackets.
Yeah.
Were you like that?
No, actually I was not.
Oh, really?
Did you ever go through a rebellious stage?
I did, but it wasn't your common rebellion per se. I mean, I
So
didn't.
you weren't doing drugs and drinking and
no alcohol,
staying
no
out till 3 in the
parties.
morning?
No, none of that. But I think my way was scarier for my parents because what I'd do is I'd lock myself in my room and I'd refuse to talk to my parents.
Oh, girls are so much fun.
And I would only talk to my friends whenever my parents told me to do something or they said something. I'd be like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they say there are stages of rebellion. Just refusing is kind of the first stage. And my son's already doing that.
Oh, really? And he's 2?
No, he's 1.5. He's not even 1.5. And he's, doing funny things for fun sometimes, too. Just, I didn't come in. No,
rejecting.
No. But I guess I never really had a chance to go through a rebellious
What do you
stage.
mean?
I had a very strict father, so there was no chance.
I had strict parents too, but that's why I chose that method of rebelling against my parents.
I was just too scared. But my sister was a rebel. She'd skip out of school and go on her boyfriend's motorcycle cruising around and do things like that.
I thought those things only happened in the movies for me. Yeah, anyway.
Well,
I could never even...
That was her in high school.
...dream of doing that. Skipping school? My parents would send me to school even when I was sick. So
that's not a good idea.
You're coughing, it's okay.
Maybe it's why you started to rebel, huh?
Maybe.
I'm worried about the kids rebelling.
Oh, that's still a long way away.
But boys, when they rebel, what do? Get a motorcycle or,
That's dangerous.
Get in a fight, maybe, It's inevitable.
Welcome back, everyone. Did you enjoy today's actual talk conversation between Peter and Joanne? Now, what did they mention in today's conversation? Joanne said something about how she acted when she was a teenager, how she was rebellious. She said that she would often say, no, I don't want to do that. She would say no to her parents whenever they told her to do something or whenever they said something. She rebelled against them. But as for Peter, he said that he was too scared to do that because his father, I believe, or his parents were quite strict. But he did tell us a little bit about his sister, how she even skipped school and went off with her boyfriend to go on a motorcycle ride. Okay, they would often go on these cruises. Anyhow, let's take a look at the actual talk conversation together then. Here we go. Now we've got Peter saying, you know that whole James Dean, live fast, die young. Have a ravishing corpse. Okay. Now, obviously, we know that this is what James Dean said because he says, you know that whole James Dean thing? Or that James Dean, live fast, die young, have a ravishing corpse. Or perhaps it's something about James Dean's life. Anyhow, let's take a look. Live fast. Okay, we're talking about fast-paced things. Things happening in life very, very fast. And die young, meaning dying at a young age. It's true. If you take a look at James Dean's life, that's right, he did not have a long life. He did die at a rather young age. So he lived fast and died young, meaning died at a young age. Have a ravishing corpse. Now, what is a corpse? A corpse is the body of a dead person, okay? In other words, dead body is a corpse, but ravishing. Ravishing actually has many different definitions. It can mean delightful, joyous, very beautiful, attractive, for example. So I guess this could have many different definitions. You can interpret it in many different ways. But perhaps we're talking about, having a full life, even if you die young, and dying beautifully, or being remembered to have lived a wonderful life. Okay? Anyhow, Joanne says, oh yeah, motorcycles, leather jackets. Were you like that? Were you like that? Meaning, were you into motorcycles and leather jackets? Were you a rebel when you were young? And he says, no, actually, I was not. I was not like that. I was not a rebel. Did you ever go through a rebellious stage? This is our first pattern for today that we'll be taking a look at later on. Now, to go through something means to experience, but go through a certain stage or go through a phase means to go through or experience a short period of time of doing something, okay? Something that is often considered normal. So we often go through a phase of something or a something phase, which means we're crazy about something for a short period of time. Say, for example, if you were really, really into Beethoven for maybe 6 months, even shorter, or maybe for just a year, but for that time period, you were crazy about Beethoven. All you listened to was Beethoven. Then you can say, well, I went through a Beethoven phase. Okay? We'll practice that pattern later on. The question is, anyhow, did you ever go through a rebellious stage? Meaning, did you ever rebel against your parents? Were you ever rebellious? Okay? And then Joanne says, well, yes, I did go through a rebellious stage, but it wasn't your common rebellion per se. We took a look at per se a long, long time ago. Now, per se is used in, I would say casual English, and in most cases it means accurate, okay? Correct, accurate. So in other words, she's saying it wasn't your common rebellion per se, meaning, well, I wouldn't exactly call it a rebellion stage or a rebellious stage. So Peter says, so you weren't drinking and staying out until 3 in the morning? In other words, so do you mean you didn't drink and that you didn't stay out until 3 in the morning? She says, oh, no. No alcohol, no parties, none of that. I did none of those things. What I do, now she's talking about what she did in the past. Not just once, but she said what I would do in the past was, meaning it happened several times, okay? What I do was lock myself in my room. What does that mean? Lock oneself somewhere. You can lock yourself in your car. You can lock your keys in your car. You can lock yourself in your room, for example, which means she would stay in her room and lock the door so that nobody could come in and she would not leave her room. So that's what she would do. And I'd refuse to talk to my parents, okay? Well, when they told me to do something, I'd say, no, I don't want to do that. So she would refuse, meaning say no, deny something, resist something. I'd refuse to do something, meaning I would not do something. So I guess that was her way of rebelling against her parents. Now, Peter says, well, they say there are stages of rebellion. There's stage 1, there's stage 2, stage 3, and so on and so forth. There's not just one stage, but several different stages. Just refusing, saying no, is kind of the first stage. And my sons are already doing that. Okay. And he says he's not, or they're not even 1.5. They're not even 2 years old yet. But he says, I never really had a chance to go through a rebellious stage. Well, now take a look at this sentence though. He says, I never really had the chance to do something, meaning he was not able to do something, although he might have wanted to. Okay? So if he said, I never had a rebellious stage, I never rebelled against my parents, that's meaning that he was willing to be a good boy. But in this case, he says, I never really had the chance to, meaning something stopped him from going through a rebellious stage. Perhaps because his parents were very strict, I would think. Now, and he says, I had a strict father. That's right. Maybe that was the reason he couldn't rebel against his parents. So there was no chance, meaning there was no possibility of me rebelling against my parents. Now, Joanne says, I had strict parents too, but that's why I chose that method of rebelling against my parents. Okay? You can rebel against something, especially parents, for example, during your adolescence years or your teenage years. Now, Peter says, oh, I was just too scared, okay? His father was very strict, and he was too scared. He was too afraid of his father. But my sister was a rebel, okay? You can be a rebel. We took a look at this word several times in the past. Now, as a noun, it is a rebel. A person can be a rebel, okay? But you can also rebel against something, so make sure you pronounce the word correctly. As a verb, it is to rebel, and as a noun, okay, you can be a rebel. Now, he talks about his sister. She'd skip school and go on her boyfriend's motorcycle, cruising around, okay, riding here and there, moving around from one place to another and do things like that. This is another pattern for today. Now, skip out of school or skip school. You can skip something which means not attend. So if you skip school, it means you don't go to school. So she would often not go to school. She would often skip school and hang out with her boyfriend. Now, Joanne says, well, whoa, I thought those things only happened in the movies. So she's saying, wow, it's hard to believe that it actually happens in real life. He says that was her in high school. Her meaning his sister, right? Now, Joanne says, skipping school, my parents would send me to school even when I was sick. So even if she was sick, maybe she could have had a stomachache, a headache, or even a bad cold, but her parents often said, oh, you're coughing? Okay, it's okay. Go to school, okay? My mom often told me to stay home, but yeah, it didn't work. I almost always had to go to school, even when I was sick. Anyhow, so Peter says, maybe it's why you started to rebel, huh? Now, it's why, meaning these reasons are perhaps the reasons why you began to. You started to rebel. Here, it's a verb, so the stress goes on the second syllable, right? Rebel. So maybe it's why you started to rebel, huh? And Joanne says, yeah, possibly, meaning maybe. And he says, I'm worried about the kids rebelling. Now, he's saying, I'm worried that my kids will start to rebel against me, okay? Now, Joanne says, oh, that's still a long way away. A long way away, meaning there's still a lot of time to pass until that actually happens because they're only a year and a half old. So for them to really rebel against their parents when they become teenagers, yeah, they still have to wait many, many years. So if you say something is a long way to go or a long way away, it means that it will possibly happen in the very far future, later on. Anyway, Peter says, but boys, when they rebel, what do? Get a motorcycle or get in a fight? Maybe. It's inevitable. That's what he says. Now, this is one of our vocab words for today. I mentioned that word in the beginning of today's lesson. I said, well, the rebellious stage, it's inevitable. This word is kind of tricky. It's difficult to pronounce, but it means that something is unavoidable. It's bound to happen, okay? Something that you cannot avoid in most cases. Okay, well, with these patterns and these vocab words in mind, take a listen to the actual talk one more time.
You know that whole James Dean, live fast, die young, have a ravaging corpse,
yeah.
rebel without a cause
Motorcycles, leather jackets.
Yeah.
Were you like that?
No, actually I was not.
Oh, really?
Did you ever go through a rebellious stage?
I did, but it wasn't your common rebellion per se. I mean, I didn't.
So you weren't doing drugs and drinking and
alcohol,
staying
no
out till 3 in the
parties.
morning?
No, none of that. But I think my way was scarier for my parents because what I'd do is I'd lock myself in my room and I'd refuse to talk to my parents.
Oh, girls are so much fun.
And I would only talk to my friends whenever my parents told me to do something or they said something. I'd be like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they say there are stages of rebellion. Just refusing is kind of the first stage. And my son's already doing that.
Oh, really? And he's 2?
No, he's 1.5. He's not even 1.5. And he's, doing funny things for fun sometimes, too. Just, oh, I didn't. No,
rejecting.
No. But I guess I never really had a chance to go through a rebellious
What do you
stage.
mean?
I had a very strict father, so there was no chance.
I had strict parents too, but that's why I chose that method of rebelling against my parents.
I was just too scared. But my sister was a rebel. She'd skip out of school and go on her boyfriend's motorcycle cruising around and do things like that.
I thought those things only happened in the movies for me. Yeah, anyway.
Well,
I could never even...
That was her in high school.
...dream of doing that. Skipping school? My parents would send me to school even when I was sick. So
that's not a good idea.
You're coughing, it's okay.
Maybe it's why you started to rebel, huh?
Maybe.
I'm worried about the kids rebelling.
Oh, that's still a long way away.
But boys, when they rebel, what do? Get a motorcycle or,
That's dangerous.
Get in a fight maybe, It's inevitable.
Well, now that you've taken a listen to the actual talk conversation for the second time, I hope you have a better understanding of what they were talking about. Now, once again, today's topic is rebellious stage, a phase that teenagers usually go through, especially when they rebel against their parents or even teachers or anyone, for example. Let's take a look at some words and then move on to today's patterns. It's time for actual expressions. Here we go. The first word we have for you is ravishing. Now, they were talking about James Dean, right? Live fast, die young, have a ravishing corpse, right? Now, ravishing, as I mentioned, could mean extremely beautiful. Not just beautiful, but very, very beautiful, enchanting, or even captivating, okay? It also means very attractive, delightful, and joyous even in certain situations. Now, rebellious is a big word today, okay? We're talking about rebellious stage, and some synonyms are disloyal, disobedient, and resistant. Now, as you can see, we've got dis and dis, meaning not. We're talking about the negative. You're not loyal. You're not obedient. You're not following the rules of something. Moving on to refuse. Refuse. The stress goes on the second syllable. Refuse means to decline, ignore, or even reject. Simply put, it means to say no. I will not, okay? You are refusing to do something or say something in some cases. Strict. Some synonyms of strict are stringent, stern, inflexible, and unyielding. So often parents will demand that certain rules concerning behavior be obeyed. So if your father or mother, they're strict, it means they have certain rules and they need to be followed. They tell you to follow those rules, which means they're strict. My mom was very strict too when I was growing up. Moving on to our final vocab for today, inevitable. Okay, let's practice this word 3 times. Now, pronunciation is inevitable. Inevitable. 2 more times. Inevitable. Inevitable. It's a hard word, right? But it means unavoidable, inescapable. Okay? It's not avoidable. It is unavoidable. You will come across inevitable many, many times. It's a word that is used commonly, so keep that in mind, all right? Okay, then let's move on to our patterns for today. Now, to go through a certain stage or a phase means to experience something. Often, it's short-lived for a short period of time. I gave you an example of listening to Beethoven, right? Okay, so what you can say is perhaps a question. What phase did you go through when you were in high school? Okay, so if you were a rebel and you rebelled against your teachers or your parents, you could say, well, I went through a rebellious stage in high school. Or you can say, he went through a bad boy phase in his high school senior year. So what does this mean? When I gave you an example, I said, I went through a Beethoven stage, meaning I would only listen to Beethoven for a short period of time. In this case, you are saying that this person, this boy, went through a bad boy phase in his high school senior year, meaning during his high school senior year, he was a bad boy, but only during that senior year. Not for a long time, but for a short period of time, he was a bad boy. So he went through a bad boy phase. Okay. Moving on to, my brother went through a poker phase. What does that mean? We're not talking about a poker face. No, we're talking about a phase. Okay? So a poker phase in this case would mean that this boy, my brother, often played poker. He would play poker all the time, every day, for a short period of time, for several months or even up to a year. So he went through a poker phase. Okay. Now, our next pattern is, there is no chance, meaning there is no possibility. There's no chance Heather will say yes, which means there is no possibility that Heather will answer yes. What about this one? Let's make it into a question. You can ask someone, no chance you can lend me a couple $100? Okay, this sentence or this question might look strange to you. Okay, it's not a complete sentence, but no chance. I guess there is no chance you can lend me a couple $100. Now, this is something you can also ask someone. Is there a possibility that you can lend me a couple $100? Let's try this one. No chance you can lend me a couple $100, meaning, could you possibly lend me a couple $100? Okay, moving on to our next one, skip something. We were talking about Peter's sister skipping out of school or skipping school, which means to not go, not attend, for example. You can say, well, when I was in high school, I used to skip school with my friends. I was a rebel and I used to skip school with my friends, which means I would often not go to school. What about this one? Our final sentence. I skipped college and started working at 19. So what does this mean? In this case, it means that this person did not go to college. Okay, so right after graduating high school, he or she started to work at the age of 19. I skipped college and started working at 19. So I only graduated high school and I started working straight away. Okay, so this is how you can make use of skip something in a sentence. All right, practice them more on your own.